right, welcome in. Today, we are setting the stage for what is, honestly, a monumental clash between two absolute giants of the mind. In this explainer, we're exploring Jung versus Freud, the dreams theory that split psychology. This is a truly fascinating story of how one single concept completely shattered a legendary intellectual partnership, and in the process, totally reshaped how humanity views the unconscious mind. Because before this fracture, psychoanalysis was a pretty united front. But afterward, well, the entire landscape of human self-discovery was just changed forever.
Okay, let's dive into this. What do you think caused the absolute greatest split in the history of psychology? It's a great question, right? Now, you might naturally think it was some intense debate over clinical methods, or maybe conscious behavior, or even childhood development. But no, the answer actually lies in something much more mysterious, deeply personal, and entirely intangible. It lies in the things we see when our eyes are closed. Literally, the very fabric of our nightly visions became the exact wedge that drove the two greatest psychological pioneers apart. So let's start with section 1, the psychology of dreams. So what do we actually mean when we say dreams theory? Well, it's the conceptual framework used to interpret, analyze, and understand the fundamental meaning of our dreams. And for early psychoanalysts, you have to understand, dreams were definitely not just random neural firings or biological noise. Freud famously called dreams the royal road to a knowledge of the unconscious activities of the mind. This conceptual framework was the primary tool they used to decode the hidden, repressed parts of human nature. By interpreting dreams, these early therapists believed they could unlock traumas, hidden desires, basically the absolute core of human motivation. So this specific framework wasn't just some minor academic talking point, It was the absolute lifeblood of their clinical work. How you interpreted a dream essentially dictated your entire approach to understanding the human mind. And because of that, this theoretical framework became the ultimate catalyst for division. Think about it. Out of all the possible psychological concepts these two brilliant pioneers could have debated, it was specifically the theory of dreams that ignited this massive historical fire. Why? Well, because dreams are incredibly subjective. They're volatile. To Freud, the dream was this highly censored, coded message that was hiding uncomfortable, often sexual, repressed desires. And he demanded rigid adherence to this really strict interpretation. Jung, however, felt this was way too limiting. He started to see dreams not as this dark closet where we hide our worst secrets, but as a place where the mind actively tries to reveal deeper, universal truths. And when you have two brilliant, incredibly strong-willed individuals who view the very mechanism of human revelation in such profoundly opposing ways, well, the intellectual environment basically becomes a powder keg. Which brings us to section 2, Jung versus Freud. And this brilliantly illustrates the divide that emerged between Freud and Jung, which is hands down one of the most fascinating intellectual clashes of the 20th century. We literally have two foundational figures looking at the exact same phenomenon, the human dream, and deriving inherently opposing views on what it actually does. So Freud's dream theory posited that dreams are essentially wish fulfillments. He believed our minds take these unacceptable, repressed desires from our waking life and disguise them using elaborate symbolism. In his view, a dream has a manifest content, which is the literal, often bizarre storyline you remember when you wake up, and a latent content, which is the hidden, often taboo psychological meaning buried underneath. But Jung completely rejected this strict, backward-looking, pathologizing view. He didn't believe dreams were just hiding things behind deceptive symbols. Instead, he argued that dreams were naturally trying to communicate important messages to help a person grow. He brought in this incredible concept of the collective unconscious, a deep layer of the psyche shared by all of humanity, populated by universal themes that he called archetypes. For Jung, a dream wasn't just a disguised personal neurosis. It was an attempt at compensation, a way for the psyche to balance itself out and guide a person toward wholeness, or what he called individuation. So the core conflict really boils down to this: two psychological giants, one central phenomenon, and fundamentally opposed interpretations. And I really want to stress the sheer weight of that word versus here. This wasn't some polite academic disagreement over a cup of tea. It was a foundational, unresolvable, philosophical clash. See, Freud was deeply committed to his psychoanalytic dogma. He really needed his successors, especially Jung, who he viewed as his intellectual heir, to hold the line and protect his theories from a really skeptical scientific community. But Jung, on the other hand, felt totally suffocated by Freud's insistence on reducing nearly every single dream to repressed sexual impulses. Jung was pulling towards this broader, more expansive, almost mystical understanding of the human soul. This wasn't just a disagreement over a clinical technique, it was a battle over the fundamental nature of human consciousness itself. The divide just got so deep that they simply could no longer work together under the same theoretical roof.
Let's move into our final section. Section 3, the Great Split. Let's move through the steps and see exactly how this builds. Early on, psychology was a relatively unified front, building this massive momentum with psychoanalysis leading the charge. Freud and Jung had literally spent years traveling, lecturing, and building the foundations of this new science together. But as their interpretations of the dream world clashed more and more, the internal pressure just became too great. Jung's eventual publication of his book Psychology of the Unconscious effectively signaled his formal public departure from Freudian orthodoxy. The immovable object of Freud's rigid dogma met the unstoppable force of Jung's expanding worldview, and this culminated in the ultimate schism of the entire discipline. A single, intensely debated theoretical disagreement about what happens when we sleep systematically tore their relationship apart and fractured the entire field in two. The ultimate result? A completely fractured psychology. And I mean fractured. This wasn't just a dent or a bend, it was a clean break that created entirely new schools of thought. Freud continued to develop his school of psychoanalysis, strictly focusing on personal history, repressed trauma, and the Oedipus complex. But Jung, now completely freed from Freud's constraints, went on to found analytical psychology. Jung's new school fully embraced the collective unconscious, those archetypal images we talked about, and a much more spiritual, forward-looking approach to psychological healing. This single, monumental conflict forever altered the discipline. It literally created a divergence in how professionals study the unconscious mind, a divergence that absolutely persists to this very day, shaping the distinct modern therapeutic landscapes that we navigate right now. Which brings us to a deeply provocative question I want you to ponder. Whose theory truly won the battle for our dreams? Did Freud's approach of uncovering repressed desires prevail? Or did Jung's conceptual framework of archetypes and the collective unconscious ultimately capture the true reality of our sleeping minds? The modern-day impact of this very split is still being felt, debated, and utilized in therapy rooms all over the world today. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and hey, whatever you do tonight, keep questioning what your dreams are trying to tell you.